In Radar, you have the option to set different access rights for your data. You can do this by setting the overall dataset access level and by restricting the necessary files. The dataset access level is just an indicative marker, while the file restrictions are what will protect sensitive and proprietary data. Let's start by discussing the overall access levels you can set in Radar. When you first create a dataset, you will fill out the basic metadata. To learn more about how to fill in the metadata fields, you can watch the corresponding video. The fields we're interested in this video are the access fields at the bottom of the form. In the field Access Rights, you can choose between Open, Restricted, Embargoed, and Closed, with Open meaning that the majority, if not all, of the files are openly available and unrestricted in any way, while the Restricted option is perfect for datasets where there are some files restricted or where files are restricted but offer the option to send an access request. The Embargoed option will be the solution for files that have an embargo date before which they're not allowed to be publicly available. You will then set an embargo date to indicate when the data is allowed to be published publicly. This is just an indication date and doesn't automatically publish your data. And finally, the Closed option is meant for those datasets that don't allow any access to any of the files and are also not open to access requests. For those datasets that are marked as closed or restricted, it's also required to fill in a reason as to why they are not open in the legitimate opt-out field. This can be because of privacy issues, intellectual property rights, ethical aspects, or aspects of dual use. Note that the metadata of a closed dataset will be openly available after publication. The overall dataset access level doesn't actually restrict any files, as the system cannot know which files should or shouldn't be restricted. So once you've saved your dataset, you'll have to scroll down to the Files tab to actually restrict the relevant files. In the Files tab, you can restrict or embargo multiple files at once or just one at a time. You can do so by checking the boxes for the files you want to restrict or embargo, and by then clicking the Edit Files button. Here you'll find the option to restrict, unrestrict, or to embargo them. If you select the Restrict option, you can fill in the terms of access and choose whether you want to give visitors the option to request access. If you choose not to enable access requests, then you should supply the reason why in the Terms of Access field. Once filled in, you select Save Changes and your file will be marked with a small lock icon to indicate it being restricted. You can always undo this by selecting the Unrestrict option instead. For the Embargo File option, it's a bit trickier. Again, you select the files you want to embargo using the tick boxes. Select Edit Files and choose Embargo. A pop-up will appear where you need to select the embargo date on which you want the restriction to be released, and you can give a short reason as to why the embargo exists. Be careful with file embargoes though. Once an embargo is set on a file level, you can't change it anymore. The file will go live on the date you chose. So if you're not too sure about the embargo date, a better option is to select embargo on the dataset level in the form, but to use the restrict option on your file level instead. This way you can move the embargo date and all you'll have to do is manually unrestrict the files once the date passes. And note that the metadata is always openly available after publication, even when files are restricted or embargoed. It's important to correctly restrict or embargo files before you submit it for review for the first time, because Radar works with versioning. This means that if you publish a dataset with an unrestricted file and then make an update in which you restrict the file, that the previous version with the unrestricted file will still be accessible through the Versions tab at the bottom of the dataset page. So be mindful of that. If it were to happen that you incorrectly published a file that shouldn't be unrestricted because of legal reasons, then contact the Radar help desk. They'll be able to help you make that version of the dataset inaccessible. Just make sure to give a good reason for this, as deaccessioning is best done sparingly. Once you've indicated the access levels and set the access rights for the files, You can go to the Terms tab and click on Edit Terms Requirements to select the license you want your data to be published under. This is a critical decision to make and something you should discuss with your supervisor if you're not sure which one to select. You simply choose one of the default licenses from the drop-down menu at the top of the page. If you want to fill in a bespoke or custom license, then select that option and fill in your own custom terms of use in the fields that appear. The custom KU Leuven option is only meant for datasets of which all files are restricted or closed. Once you've selected your license, make sure to save your selection. I hope this video helped you better understand the different access options and license settings in Radar.